The Forgotten Treasure, John Lennon's most valuable guitar. Did you know that a 12-string guitar forgotten in a dusty attic became the most expensive instrument ever played by John Lennon? In this video, we'll tell you how the story of this guitar not only helped define an era, but also transformed into an invaluable treasure that reached a record-breaking price at auction. Get ready to discover the secrets of this instrument that, just like Lennon and the Beatles, changed music history forever. We talk about musical artifacts that have shaped history. Few can compare to the instruments played by the Beatles. These aren't just objects made of wood and metal. They're vessels that carried the sounds that revolutionized popular culture. Among these treasures, one stands out not just for its unique sound, but for its remarkable journey from the hands of a musical genius to obscurity and back to the spotlight again. This is the extraordinary tale of John Lennon's Framus Hootenanny 12-string guitar, an instrument that would eventually become the most valuable Lennon guitar ever sold. By 1965, the Beatles had already become the absolute kings of rock, with hits climbing popularity charts at an impressive speed. The band continuously experimented and searched for new sounds. John Lennon, always in pursuit of a unique way to express himself, found in the Framus Hootenanny 12-string guitar a vibrant sound full of nuances that perfectly complemented his style and musical vision. The guitar, with its characteristic wide body and resonant sound, joined Lennon's repertoire and began to accompany his compositions. It was on the iconic album Help where the Framus first shined, contributing the sonic richness that would characterize songs like You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, a folk-tinged track that needed that distinctive tone only this guitar could offer. Lennon didn't just play it, he explored its possibilities to the fullest, making it part of the very essence of his music. What made the Framus Hootenanny particularly special was its distinctive 12-string configuration. Unlike a standard 6-string guitar, the 12-string creates a natural chorus effect, with each note being doubled, the lower 4 strings paired with higher octaves and the 2 highest strings paired in unison. This gives the instrument a shimmering, jangly quality that became particularly fashionable in the mid-1960s. For Lennon, who was constantly pushing the boundaries of the Beatles' sound during this pivotal period of their career, the Framus offered a texture that could cut through their increasingly complex arrangements while adding a folk-inspired depth that complemented his introspective lyrical turn. After its appearance in some of the Beatles' most popular songs, the Framus Hootenanny became part of Lennon's memories. In 1965, he decided to give it away, a detail that, though seemingly trivial, would add mystery and value to the guitar in the decades to come. Lennon gifted the guitar to Gordon Waller, member of the British duo Peter and Gordon. For Waller, the guitar was much more than a gift. It was a link to Lennon and a piece of Beatles history. However, the guitar wouldn't remain in his hands, as he eventually decided to give it to his manager, who stored it without much ceremony in the attic of his house in England, and there it remained, forgotten while time passed and the Beatles' legacy grew. Nobody knew that this historic guitar, played by Lennon during crucial moments of his career, was hidden in the most unexpected place, waiting for the moment of its return to the spotlight. Years later, in 2024, a family moved into that English house and, while cleaning the attic, discovered what at first appeared to be just an old guitar. However, upon closer inspection, they noticed details that made them think it might have special value. The news quickly reached experts in rock memorabilia circles, and that's when the authentication process for this potential treasure began. It was a sensation. Lennon's Framus Hootenanny, lost for 5 decades, had been rediscovered. Regia did. The historical value of this guitar went beyond the material. It wasn't just an old instrument, it was a fragment of the history of one of the most influential bands of all time, and a direct link to John Lennon. The timing of the discovery couldn't have been more poignant in a world where Beatles memorabilia has become increasingly scarce and valuable. Finding a major piece like this is akin to uncovering buried treasure. For many music historians, the rediscovery represented something of a miracle. After all, countless guitars from that era have been damaged, destroyed, or lost to time. That this particular instrument survived largely intact, hidden away from the elements and potential damage, speaks to a remarkable stroke of luck that has preserved a piece of musical history that might otherwise have been forever lost. Though the discovery was extraordinary, the challenge was proving its authenticity. It wasn't enough to claim it was Lennon's guitar, it had to be proven proven. Beatles memorabilia experts, led by Andy Babayuk, began a detailed analysis. They compared the guitar with archival images, examined every mark and scratch in the wood, and even studied the wear on the strings. It was a meticulous process, but they finally confirmed what everyone hoped for. This was, without a doubt, the guitar that Lennon had played during the recording of Help. With this confirmation, the value of the Framus Hootenanny skyrocketed. It wasn't just a rare instrument, but a true symbol of the golden era of rock. Its authenticity added a layer of significance that attracted the attention of collectors worldwide, willing to pay an enormous sum to own this piece of musical history. Finally, the Framus Hootenanny was put up for auction by Julien's Auctions in May 2024. Expectations were extremely high. It was estimated that the final price would range between $600,000 and $800,000. However, the public response was much greater than anyone could have anticipated. The guitar sold for an impressive sum, $2.85 million, establishing a new record for a guitar played by Lennon. This price not only broke the previous record set by Lennon's Gibson J160E, which sold for $2.4 million in 2015, but also reaffirmed the emotional and cultural value that Beatles instruments hold for their fans. The Framus Hootenanny was now established not just as Lennon's most expensive guitar, but as one of the most iconic instruments in rock history. The Framus Hootenanny represents much more than a price tag for rock lovers. This instrument encapsulates an era when music was a way to break molds, explore sounds, and challenge conventions. The fact that Lennon played it adds an almost mystical dimension. Each note, each scratch is a reminder of the Beatles' impact on the world and how their musical experiments became generational anthems. But the story of the Framus Hootenanny also speaks to the power of objects to connect people with the past. For fans, owning this guitar would be like possessing a part of Lennon's essence, as if by touching it, they could get a little closer to the spirit of the man who helped transform popular music. The Framus wasn't just a witness to Lennon's creativity, it was a tool in the creation of that magic that has endured throughout the years. Its rediscovery and the value it reached at auction demonstrate that music and everything surrounding it continues to be a powerful force capable of moving, inspiring, and transporting people to past eras. Consider for a moment the journey of this singular instrument. Born in a German factory, it traveled to England, where it fell into the hands of one of the 20th century's most influential artists. It vibrated with melodies that would become immortal, capturing the sound of a cultural revolution. Then, through an act of generosity characteristic of Lennon, it began a different journey, from the spotlight to obscurity, from center stage to forgotten attic. And finally, decades later, it emerged once again to captivate a new generation. This guitar's value isn't merely in its connection to fame or its price tag, but in how it embodies a pivotal moment in musical evolution. The mid-1960s marked a transition period for the Beatles, as they moved from their earlier, simpler pop compositions to more complex, introspective work. The Framus Hootenanny, with its rich, textured sound, was part of this transformation, a bridge between the band's Yeah, Yeah, Yeah era and their more experimental period that would follow. When collectors look at this guitar, they're not just seeing wood and strings, they're seeing a physical manifestation of that artistic metamorphosis. Before the Framus Hootenanny broke records, Lennon's most valuable guitar was the Gibson J160E, famous for its use in recordings such as Love Me Do and I Want to Hold Your Hand. The Gibson also has its own fascinating history. It disappeared mysteriously in 1963 and was rediscovered decades later in California. Although it was auctioned for $2.4 million, the Framus now surpasses it in value, highlighting the continuing passion of fans for any piece of memorabilia associated with the Beatles. Beyond its monetary value, the 12-string Framus Hootenanny has become an immortal symbol of an era of musical innovation and experimentation. It represents the time when rock sought to break the barriers of sound, and the Beatles' influence went beyond what any band had achieved before. For Lennon and Beatles fans, this guitar is a tangible object that connects generations of music lovers. It's a reminder that music has the power to transcend time and space, and of how the Beatles helped define popular culture in the second half of the 20th century. The story of the Framus Hootenanny is much more than the story of an expensive guitar. It's a testament to the power of music to leave an indelible mark on those who listen to it, and a reminder of the cultural impact of John Lennon and the Beatles. From its role in some of the band's most iconic songs to its rediscovery and record sale, this guitar continues to captivate rock fans and ultimately represents a piece of history that has stood the test of time. If you're passionate about rock and want to continue exploring the mysteries behind the instruments and stories that marked music legends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here you'll find content about the gems and anecdotes that formed rock history, so that together we can continue celebrating this musical legacy. See you in the next video.